The white dress I'd spent months dreaming about now felt like a prison as I was shoved into the back seat of a black sedan, my mother-in-law's words still ringing in my ears. "Take her to the mountains. She's not marrying my son." The fabric bunched and twisted around my legs as I struggled to right myself, the delicate lace catching on the leather seats. Through the blur of tears and mascara, I caught a glimpse of the driver in the rearview mirror, and my heart stopped. "Nathan?" I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. My first love, the man who disappeared from my life 5 years ago without a word. The same dark eyes that once looked at me with such tenderness now refused to meet mine in the mirror. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 hours ago, I had been standing in front of my bedroom mirror at my parents' house, wondering if I was making the right decision marrying Richard. Now here I was, being kidnapped on my wedding day by his mother and the ghost of my past. "Your mother always said I had terrible timing," Nathan finally spoke, his voice deeper than I remembered. He pulled onto the highway as Violet, my almost mother-in-law, climbed into the passenger seat, her expensive perfume filling the car with a suffocating sweetness. I should have seen this coming. The signs were there, written in Violet's tight smiles and calculating glances during every wedding planning session. The way she'd examine me like a counterfeit bill whenever I spoke about my small catering business, her lips pursed in perpetual disapproval. "A businessman's wife doesn't work in a kitchen," she'd say, while Richard would squeeze my hand under the table, promising we'd figure it out after the wedding. Richard. My stomach churned thinking about him waiting at the altar, checking his watch, straightening his bow tie for the 100th time. He was probably making excuses to our guests right now, his face flushed with embarrassment. Or worse, he was part of this plan all along. "This is kidnapping," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't just—" "Oh, darling." Violet cut me off, turning in her seat to face me. Her perfectly styled gray hair didn't move an inch. "I'm saving you both from a terrible mistake. Richard needs someone who understands our world, our responsibilities to the family name. You're lovely, in your own way, but you'll never fit." The casual cruelty of her words stung worse than the fact that she'd orchestrated this whole thing. I'd spent 2 years trying to prove myself worthy of her son, of her family's approval. Now I realized I'd been auditioning for a role I was never meant to play, but there was something else nagging at me, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "Why Nathan?" I demanded, my fear giving way to anger. Of all people, why him? Violet's smile reminded me of a cat who'd just cornered a mouse. "Because, dear, he's the only one who had as much to lose as you did by this wedding taking place." The mountain road stretched ahead of us, winding higher into the gathering dusk. My phone had been left behind in the bridal suite, my wallet still in my maid of honor's purse. I was completely at their mercy, trapped in a car with 2 people who had just destroyed everything I'd spent the last 2 years building. Nathan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I caught him glancing at me in the rearview mirror again. There was something in his expression, regret, fear, that made me wonder if Violet had as much power over him as she did over me. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the road. As we climbed higher, the temperature dropped, and I shivered in my sleeveless gown. Whatever game Violet was playing, whatever reason Nathan had for being part of it, one thing was becoming crystal clear. This wasn't just about stopping a wedding. This was about power, control, and secrets that had been buried for 5 years. Secrets that were about to come to light, whether any of us were ready for them or not. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the peaks, Violet's phone buzzed. The satisfied smile that spread across her face as she read the message made my blood run cold. "Everything's proceeding exactly as planned," she announced, more to Nathan than to me. He nodded slightly, but I noticed his grip on the steering wheel tighten even more. What I didn't know then, as we drove deeper into the mountains and further from the life I thought I was going to have, was that Violet's perfect plan had one fatal flaw. She thought she knew everything about me, about Nathan, about her precious son, but she had no idea what I was capable of when cornered. And I was about to show her. The mountain road twisted like a serpent through the darkness, each turn taking us further from civilization. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale and exhale the way my therapist had taught me after Nathan left. The irony of using techniques I learned to cope with losing him while sitting in a car he was driving wasn't lost on me. "You must be wondering why I agreed to this," Nathan said suddenly, his voice breaking the tense silence. Violet had dozed off in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window. "I'm wondering a lot of things," I replied, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Like how the man who once promised to love me forever became someone who would kidnap a bride on her wedding day. I saw his jaw clench in the dim dashboard light. "You're not the only one who moved on, Beatrice. I have my reasons." "Moved on?" I almost laughed. "Is that what you call disappearing without a word? Leaving me to wake up alone in our apartment with nothing but a note saying I'm sorry?" The pain I'd buried for years bubbled to the surface. "I looked for you for months. Your phone was disconnected. Your email deleted. Even your sister claimed she didn't know where you were. Because I asked her not to tell you," he admitted quietly. "It was better that way." "Better for who?" I demanded, leaning forward. "Better for you to walk away from everything we built together? Better to leave me wondering if you were dead in a ditch somewhere?" Violet stirred slightly but didn't wake. Nathan waited until her breathing returned to its steady rhythm before speaking again. "You remember that business loan I applied for? The one for the restaurant we dreamed of opening?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "I got called in for a final meeting with the bank, but it wasn't the bank's representatives waiting for me. It was Violet." The pieces started falling into place. What did she do? She had proof that my father's construction company had been involved in some questionable deals before he died. Nothing illegal, but enough to destroy what was left of his reputation and bankrupt my mother if it got out. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Violet made it clear. Either I disappeared from your life, or she'd make sure my family lost everything." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Why?" "We didn't even know Richard then." "No, but Violet did know about the property your parents' farm sat on, the same property her company desperately wanted for their new development project." Nathan's voice was bitter. "She knew they'd never sell to her. But if you were heartbroken enough to want to leave town—" "My parents did sell," I whispered, the reality of it hitting me like a wave. 6 months after you left. I couldn't stand being there anymore, seeing all the places that reminded me of you. They sold it for less than market value just to help me start fresh in the city." "Where you met Richard," Nathan finished, "at a charity gala hosted by none other than Violet Blackwood." The manipulation was breathtaking in its complexity. Violet had orchestrated everything, playing a long game I never saw coming. She'd separated Nathan and me, secured the land she wanted, and then positioned her son to meet me when I was at my most vulnerable. "But why bring you back now?" I asked, my mind racing. Why risk exposing her own scheme? Nathan glanced at Violet's sleeping form. "Because I found proof of what she did. Real proof, not just about my father's company, but about dozens of other families she's destroyed. I threatened to expose her if she went through with Richard's wedding to you. So instead of canceling the wedding, she decided to turn it into a public spectacle. The pieces were falling into place. She's making sure Richard believes I left him at the altar. She gets to keep her reputation intact while destroying mine." "Beatrice," Nathan's voice softened. "There's more. Richard." Suddenly, Violet's phone buzzed again, and she jerked awake. Nathan fell silent, but his eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, trying to convey something urgent. "Perfect timing," Violet said, checking her phone. "We're almost there." She turned to look at me, her smile sharp in the darkness. "I do hope you're not afraid of heights, dear. The view from the cabin is quite spectacular, during the day at least. A cabin, in the mountains, miles from anywhere, with no phone, no witnesses, and no way to call for help. The reality of my situation hit me with fresh terror. But as Violet turned back around, satisfied with whatever her latest message said, I caught Nathan making a subtle gesture. His free hand dropped briefly to his jacket pocket, where I saw the outline of what could only be my phone, the one I thought I'd left behind. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Nathan might have been forced to play Violet's game, but he wasn't playing it by her rules. Now I just had to figure out what he was trying to tell me about Richard before Violet woke up. As we turned onto an unmarked road, the trees pressing in closer on both sides, I made a decision. I might be wearing a wedding dress, but I wasn't going to play the role of helpless bride. Violet had underestimated me once, thinking she could manipulate my life from the shadows. She was about to discover just how much of a mistake that was. The cabin materialized out of the darkness like a creature emerging from the woods. It wasn't the rustic retreat I'd expected. Instead, a modern structure of glass and stone perched on the edge of a cliff, its windows dark and uninviting. My wedding heels crunched on gravel as Violet practically dragged me from the car, her manicured nails digging into my arm. "Welcome to where I spent my first honeymoon," Violet announced, her voice dripping with false warmth. Of course, that marriage didn't last. Some people just aren't meant to be part of the Blackwood family. The threat in her words was clear. I glanced at Nathan, who was retrieving bags from the trunk. Apparently, this little kidnapping had been well planned. His face was unreadable, but I noticed how he positioned himself between Violet and me as we walked to the door. Inside, the cabin was all sleek furniture and cold surfaces. Violet flipped switches, bringing warm light to the space, but it did nothing to chase away the chill I felt. Family photos lined one wall, generations of Blackwoods staring down with the same stern expression Violet wore. Richard's face appeared in the more recent ones, but something about his smile seemed forced, mechanical. "Nathan, show Beatrice to the east bedroom," Violet commanded, already pulling out her phone. "I need to make some calls, and do remind her that cell service is spotty up here." She smiled that predatory smile again. "We wouldn't want anyone getting any foolish ideas." The moment we were out of Violet's sight, Nathan pressed my phone into my hand. "Battery's almost dead," he whispered. "But there's something you need to see. Richard sent it right before the wedding." My hands trembled as I unlocked the screen. There was one unread message from Richard. "I can't go through with this. Not after what I discovered about Mother and Jackson. Beatrice, I'm so sorry. I'll explain everything. But you need to get out now. Don't trust anyone, especially not Mother. She knows I know. Jackson, Violet's second husband who died in a hiking accident 2 years ago, just months before I met Richard. He never made it to the church," Nathan murmured, keeping his voice low. "Violet's men intercepted him when he tried to warn you. That's why she moved up her plan to grab you. She couldn't risk Richard reaching you first." The room spun slightly. He's alive," Nathan assured me quickly, but detained. "Violet has too much to lose to risk anything happening to her only son. She just needs to contain the situation until she can convince him to see things her way." The implications of his words made my blood run cold. I thought about how Richard had changed over the past few months, becoming more withdrawn, jumping at unexpected phone calls, insisting we move up the wedding date. He'd been discovering pieces of his mother's true nature, just as I was now. "The hiking accident," I said slowly. "Jackson found out something, didn't he? About Violet?" Nathan nodded grimly. "Jackson was an investigative journalist before he married Violet. He thought he'd found his big story, a pattern of suspicious deaths and disappeared people connected to Blackwood development projects. But before he could publish anything, he had his accident," I finished. "And Violet got everything in the will." A floorboard creaked outside the room. Nathan immediately stepped away from me, raising his voice slightly. "The bathroom's through there. I'm sure you'll want to get out of that dress." I played along. "Thank you. I just need a moment alone." The footsteps moved away, but the message was clear. We weren't safe to talk freely. I locked myself in the bathroom, my wedding dress whispering against the marble floor. In the harsh fluorescent light, I barely recognized my own reflection. Mascara had left dark tracks down my cheeks, and my carefully styled hair was coming undone. But my eyes were clear and focused. The woman in the mirror wasn't a victim. She was a survivor who had just discovered she wasn't the only one Violet had tried to destroy. Richard had tried to protect me, to warn me, and now he was paying the price. Whatever Violet had planned for us in this isolated cabin, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her win. I pulled out my phone again, knowing I had precious little battery life left. There had to be something in Richard's research about his mother, some evidence he'd discovered that would give us leverage. Violet was too smart to leave obvious traces, but everyone makes mistakes, especially people who think they're above the law. A soft knock at the door made me jump. Beatrice? It was Nathan. Violet wants us all in the living room. She says it's time to discuss tomorrow's press release about the bride who left her groom at the altar. Of course. Violet wasn't just planning to destroy my reputation, she was going to make sure the whole city knew about it. A scandal like this would effectively exile me from the social circles where I might run into Richard again, where I might tell my side of the story. I squared my shoulders and opened the door. Nathan stood there, his expression warning me to be careful. But there was something else in his eyes, a plan forming. He'd helped Violet orchestrate this kidnapping, but I was beginning to understand why. He wasn't just trying to protect his own family anymore. He was trying to gather evidence against her. As we walked back to the living room, I felt the weight of the phone in my pocket and thought about Richard's message. Violet might think she had all the power here, but she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd brought together the three people who had the most reason to want her exposed: her son's fiancé, her former victim, and her own son who'd finally discovered the truth about her. Now, we just had to survive the night. Violet had arranged herself on the leather sofa like a queen holding court, a glass of red wine in her hand. The fire she'd lit in the massive stone fireplace cast dancing shadows across her face, making her features look even sharper. She'd changed out of her mother-of-the-groom outfit into an elegant black pantsuit that reminded me of a widow's clothes. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the chair across from her. My wedding dress rustled as I lowered myself into it, feeling like a ghost in all this white. Nathan remained standing, positioning himself near the window where he could see both the room and the driveway outside. "Now then," Violet began, taking a deliberate sip of her wine. "Let's discuss how this story ends. The press release I've prepared is quite compelling. Young bride gets cold feet, abandons wealthy fiancé at the altar, disappears with former lover. A bit cliché, perhaps, but people do love their scandals." "And what about Richard's story?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The one about discovering his mother's criminal empire?" The wine glass froze halfway to her lips. For a fraction of a second, I saw genuine surprise in her eyes before the mask slipped back into place. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Jackson knew," I continued, watching her carefully. "That's why he had his accident on this very mountain, isn't it? And now Richard knows too. Is he going to have an accident as well, Violet?" She set the glass down with exaggerated care. "My dear, grief can make people believe all sorts of terrible things. Jackson was depressed after losing his job at the newspaper. And Richard, well, the stress of the wedding clearly affected his judgment. After a few days of rest and proper medication, I'm sure he'll remember events more accurately." The casual way she talked about drugging her own son made my skin crawl. "Like how you helped Nathan's father remember signing over his company assets before he died." "Actually," Nathan spoke up, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "She forged his signature. I found the original documents in her private safe last month, along with some very interesting photos of Jackson the day he died." Violet's composure cracked, just slightly. "You broke into my safe?" "No," Nathan replied. "Your son did. Turns out Richard inherited your talent for planning ahead. He just didn't inherit your capacity for murder." I watched the realization dawn on Violet's face. She wasn't the only one who'd been orchestrating events. "Where are the documents now?" "Somewhere safe," I said, drawing her attention back to me. "Along with everything Richard discovered about the other accidents around your development projects. The farmers who wouldn't sell, the environmental inspectors who asked too many questions, the business partners who wanted larger shares." "You're bluffing," Violet said, but there was a tremor in her voice. "Richard would never betray his family like that." "Family?" I laughed, and the sound echoed off the glass walls. "Is that what you call this? You've spent years manipulating and destroying people's lives. You forced Nathan away from me so you could steal my parents' land. You killed your husband when he discovered your crimes. And now you've kidnapped me and drugged your own son to keep your secrets safe." Thunder rumbled in the distance, nature providing a dramatic backdrop to our confrontation. Violet stood, her movements precise despite the fury in her eyes. "You have no idea what it takes to build and maintain a legacy. I've done what was necessary to protect this family's interests. By eliminating anyone who gets in your way." Nathan moved away from the window, his expression hard. "Like you eliminated my father when he refused to falsify inspection reports for your construction projects." Violet's laugh was cold. "Your father was weak, just like Jackson, just like Richard is becoming. Men who can't see the bigger picture, who let sentiment cloud their judgment." She turned to me, her mask finally dropping completely. "I had such hopes for you, Beatrice, a young woman from a humble background, hungry for success and acceptance. I thought you could be molded, taught to understand what real power means." "You thought I could be corrupted," I corrected her. "That's why you arranged for Richard to meet me when I was at my lowest. You wanted someone you could control, who would help you control him. And instead, you made him weak." She spat, filled his head with ideas about ethics and transparency, encouraged him to look into the family business. She shook her head in disgust. "I should have known better. You're just like your mother, too proud to understand how the real world works." The mention of my mother sparked something in me. My mother taught me that real strength comes from lifting people up, not destroying them. She built a successful business without compromising her integrity. You may have more money and power, Violet, but you'll never have what she has: people who genuinely love and respect her. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and in that brief moment, I saw something change in Violet's expression. The calculating mask was gone, replaced by something darker, more primal. She reached for her phone. "Such noble sentiments," she said, her finger hovering over the screen. "Let's see how well they serve you when—" The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, I heard Violet curse, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Thunder crashed overhead, and rain began pelting the windows. Through the chaos, I felt Nathan's hand close around my arm. "Now," he whispered urgently, "while she can't see us." I didn't hesitate. Still in my wedding dress, I let him guide me toward what I hoped was the door. Behind us, Violet was shouting something, but her voice was drowned out by another crash of thunder. What happened next would change everything, but not in the way any of us expected. The darkness was absolute, broken only by occasional flashes of lightning that turned the cabin's windows into brilliant squares of light. My wedding dress caught on something, a table, maybe, and I heard fabric tear as Nathan pulled me forward. Violet's voice rose behind us, sharp with fury. "If you leave this room, I'm calling my security team. They're already on their way with Richard, and I don't think you want to see what happens when—" A sound cut through the darkness, the distinctive click of a gun being cocked. "No, Mother," a familiar voice said quietly. "I don't think you'll be calling anyone." Lightning flashed again, and there was Richard, standing in the doorway. His wedding tuxedo was rumpled, his face bruised, but his hand was steady as he held the gun pointed at his mother. One of Violet's security men lay unconscious at his feet. "Richard?" Violet's voice held a note I'd never heard before. Fear. "Darling, put that ridiculous thing down. You're not thinking clearly. The medication? Wore off 2 hours ago," he finished for her. "Your men aren't very observant when they think their prisoner is unconscious." His eyes found mine in the dim light. "Beatrice, are you all right?" I moved toward him instinctively, but Nathan held me back. "Wait," he warned. "Violet isn't alone." As if on cue, heavy footsteps sounded on the cabin's deck outside. Flashlight beams cut through the windows, more security arriving. We were surrounded. "You see?" Violet's confidence was returning. "You can't win this, Richard. Even with whatever evidence you think you have, it's your word against mine. Who do you think people will believe? The respected businesswoman or the unstable son who held his mother at gunpoint?" "They'll believe the video," I said, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. My hand went to the phone in my pocket, the one that had been recording since Nathan slipped it to me. The one where you just confessed to multiple murders, including Jackson and Nathan's father. The next flash of lightning showed Violet's face contorted with rage. She lunged for me, but Richard moved faster, stepping between us. In the struggle, the gun went off. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. For a moment, no one moved. Then Violet laughed, a high, brittle sound. "You missed," she said. "I didn't shoot," Richard replied, his voice shaking. Another flash of lightning revealed Nathan standing by the fireplace, Violet's own handgun, the one she'd hidden in the sidebar, in his grip. Blood was spreading across Violet's expensive black sleeve. "That was a warning," Nathan said calmly. "The next one won't be." Violet clutched her arm, her mask of sophistication completely shattered. "You shot me," she said incredulously. "You actually shot me." "Just a graze," Nathan replied. "Unlike what you did to my father, or to Jackson." He turned to address the men outside. "Anyone who wants to stay out of prison should leave now. The police are already on their way." Through the windows, we could see the flashlight beams wavering, then retreating. Violet's carefully constructed web of power was unraveling thread by thread. "The police can't prove anything," Violet said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not about the past," Richard agreed. "But tonight, kidnapping, assault, false imprisonment, conspiracy, and it's all on video. Plus," he reached into his jacket and pulled out a familiar-looking flash drive. "Everything I found in your safe about the other deaths. Jackson didn't just keep records, Mother. He kept backup copies." I moved to Richard's side, taking his free hand in mine. Up close, I could see the fear and determination warring in his eyes. He'd risked everything to protect me, to expose the truth about his mother. "You know what the saddest part is?" he continued, addressing Violet. "I kept hoping there was an explanation, that all the evidence Jackson collected was wrong, that my own mother couldn't be a murderer." His voice cracked slightly. "Even after I found Jackson's real autopsy report, I still wanted to believe in you." Violet sank onto the sofa, her wounded arm cradled against her chest. For the first time, she looked her age, tired and defeated. "Everything I did was for this family." "No," Richard said firmly. "Everything you did was for yourself, for power. The family was just your excuse." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The storm was passing, moonlight beginning to filter through breaks in the clouds. In that pale light, I could see tears on Violet's face, whether from pain or the realization that she'd lost everything. I couldn't tell. "It's over, Mother," Richard said quietly. "The police will be here soon. The only question is whether you'll face this with whatever dignity you have left, or if you'll make things worse by trying to run." She looked up at him, and for a moment, I saw something like pride flicker across her face. "You're stronger than I thought," she admitted. "Both of you are." Her eyes met mine. "I underestimated what you'd be willing to do for each other." The sirens were very close now. Nathan moved to the front door, gun still trained on Violet. Richard's hand tightened around mine. "I need to know," I said, addressing Violet. "All those years ago, why did you really separate Nathan and me?" "The truth." She smiled tiredly. "Because I saw myself in you. That same hunger for more. That determination to succeed, no matter what. I knew if you stayed with him, you'd never become the kind of woman who could help Richard run the family empire. Love like that. It keeps you honest." She laughed bitterly. "I couldn't risk that." Police lights flooded the cabin with red and blue. As officers burst through the door, I looked at Richard, still in his wedding tuxedo, still holding the evidence that would destroy his mother's empire. "What happens now?" I whispered. His answer was interrupted by the sound of Violet being read her rights. But the way he looked at me said everything we needed to know about what would come next. The police station's fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal. I sat in an interview room, still wearing my torn wedding dress, giving my statement to a detective who kept looking at me like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Outside, I could hear phones ringing constantly as more victims of Violet's schemes came forward. "Just a few more questions, Ms. Collins," Detective Marina Uele said, her dark eyes kind but professional. "You said Mrs. Blackwood first targeted you 5 years ago when you were dating Mr. Nathan Reynolds?" I nodded, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. "She wanted my parents' land for development. She knew they'd never sell to her directly, so My voice caught. "She forced Nathan to leave me, knowing I'd want to leave town afterward." The detective made another note. "And then she orchestrated your meeting with her son Richard?" "Yes, but Richard didn't know. I needed to make that clear." He was as much a victim as anyone. More, maybe, because she was his mother. Through the interview room's window, I could see Richard in another room across the hall, his own interview in progress. He looked exhausted, the bruise on his jaw darkening. When Violet's security team had grabbed him at the church, he'd fought back hard enough to break one man's nose. "Can you tell me about Jackson Morrison's death?" Detective Ouellet asked carefully. "Mr. Blackwood mentioned something about an autopsy report." I started to answer, but a knock at the door interrupted us. A uniformed officer stepped in and whispered something to the detective. Her eyebrows rose. "I'm sorry," she said, standing. "We need to pause here. There's been a development." She left me alone in the room. Through the window, I saw several officers hurrying past, their faces grim. A moment later, Nathan appeared at my door. "Beatrice," he said quietly, "you need to hear this." He led me to another room where Richard sat staring at a TV mounted on the wall. A news anchor was speaking urgently. Breaking news in the Blackwood scandal. Violet Blackwood, who was arrested earlier tonight on multiple charges including kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder, has apparently attempted suicide in her holding cell. She was discovered unconscious. "Is she—" I couldn't finish the question. "She's alive," Richard said, his voice hollow. "They got to her in time. Found a poison capsule hidden in her wedding ring. One last attempt to control the narrative." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. She probably thought it would make her look tragic instead of guilty. I sat beside him, taking his hand. His fingers were ice cold. "The press is outside," Nathan said, looking out the window at the gathering crowd of reporters. "They're calling it the wedding day conspiracy. Everyone wants to know why the bride disappeared and why the groom's mother is under arrest." "Let them wait," I said firmly. "We tell this story on our terms when we're ready." Richard squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Beatrice. All those years, I never saw what she really was. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." "Neither did I," Nathan added quietly. "Not until she had my father killed. And even then, I was too afraid to act until Richard found the evidence." A soft knock made us all turn. Detective Ouellet stood in the doorway with a middle-aged couple I recognized from the photos in Violet's cabin. "Mr. Blackwood," she said gently, "these are Jackson Morrison's parents. They've been following the case since their son's death. They'd like to speak with you if you're willing." Richard stood slowly, straightening his shoulders. This was part of his inheritance now, facing the consequences of his mother's actions, helping her victims find closure. I started to let go of his hand, but he held on. "Stay," he whispered. "Please." So I did, still in my ruined wedding dress, as Jackson's parents shared their story. They were the first of many who would come forward in the following days. Families of Violet's victims, business partners she'd betrayed, employees she'd threatened into silence. Each story revealed another layer of her decades-long web of manipulation and violence. As dawn began to color the sky outside the police station, Richard turned to me. "I understand if you want nothing more to do with the Blackwood name after all this. The name isn't what matters," I said. "It's what you do with it now that counts." Nathan, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. "The company's board will be meeting tomorrow. They'll want to distance themselves from Violet as much as possible." "Good," Richard said with sudden firmness, "because I have plans for how to make things right. Starting with returning land to families who were forced to sell, establishing a victims' compensation fund." He paused, looking at Nathan. "And I want you to help. Your father's company should be restored to your family." Nathan shook his head. "The company's gone. But maybe we could build something new. Something better." I thought about my own small catering business, how Violet had sneered at it for being too humble. "Sometimes the smallest businesses have the strongest foundations," I said, "because they're built on trust and hard work instead of fear and power." Detective Ouellet returned with more coffee and news that we could finally leave. "We'll need you all back for more questions tomorrow," she said. "And be prepared. This case is going to be in the headlines for months." As we stood to leave, Richard pulled me aside. "Beatrice, I know this isn't how either of us imagined our wedding day would go." "Not exactly," I agreed, managing a small smile. "But when all this is over, when the dust settles," he took both my hands in his, "I want to marry you. Not because of any plans or schemes, But because I love you. If you'll still have me. Before I could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Someone was shouting about Violet, about new evidence found in her home office. The detective hurried out, leaving us in a moment of suspended quiet. I looked at Richard, seeing not the heir to a tainted empire, but the man who had risked everything to protect me. Then at Nathan, who had carried the weight of Violet's threats for 5 years while trying to gather evidence against her. The sun was fully up now, a new day beginning. Whatever came next, the trials, the media circus, the long process of rebuilding, we would face it together, not as pawns in Violet's game, but as architects of our own future. My answer to Richard's question would have to wait. First, there were more truths to uncover, more wrongs to right. But standing there in my battle-scarred wedding dress, I already knew what that answer would be. Violet's home office felt like opening a tomb. Detective Ouellet led us through the space, pointing out where the forensics team had found hidden compartments, secret files, and a lifetime of carefully documented lies. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like ancient secrets finally set free. "We found these in a false bottom drawer," the detective said, placing a stack of leather-bound journals on Violet's massive mahogany desk. "They date back 30 years. She documented everything." Richard picked up the oldest journal with trembling hands. "She always told me to keep detailed records," he said quietly. "Said it was the mark of a good business person. I never imagined." I stood beside him as he opened to a random page. Violet's elegant handwriting filled the pages with meticulous notes about people she'd destroyed. Not just their actions, but their weaknesses, their fears, their breaking points. She'd studied human nature like a scientist studies specimens, learning how to apply just the right pressure to make people crack. "There's an entry about your parents," Detective Ouellet told me gently, "from before she sent Nathan away. She'd been watching your family for months, learning your routines, your financial situation. She knew exactly when and how to strike." My legs felt weak. Nathan guided me to a chair, his face pale as he looked at the journals. "What else did she record?" The detective hesitated. "We found letters. From your father." She pulled out an evidence bag containing yellowed envelopes. He knew something was wrong with the construction projects. He was gathering evidence, planning to come forward. These were never mailed. Nathan took the bag, staring at his father's handwriting. "She kept them? All these years?" "Violet kept everything," Richard said, still paging through the journal. "Trophies of her victories. Proof of her." He stopped suddenly, his face draining of color. "Oh God. What is it?" I moved to look over his shoulder, but he snapped the journal shut. "Beatrice, don't." His voice was rough with emotion. "Please. You don't need to see this." Detective Ouellet took the journal carefully from his hands. "Mr. Blackwood, do you need a moment?" He shook his head, running a hand through his disheveled hair. No, you need to know this. It's about Jackson. He wasn't just investigating the company's illegal activities. He found something else. Something about me." The room seemed to hold its breath. Richard looked at me, his eyes filled with pain and uncertainty. "I'm adopted," he said finally. "Jackson discovered that Violet had arranged an illegal adoption 30 years ago. She'd threatened my birth mother, forced her to give me up. Jackson was planning to tell me the truth, to help me find my real family. That's why she killed him." The revelation hung in the air like a physical thing. All these years, Violet's obsession with legacy, with the Blackwood name, had been built on yet another lie. "There's more," Detective Ouellet added quietly. "We found adoption records for other children, going back decades. It seems Mrs. Blackwood was involved in a larger scheme, helping wealthy families acquire babies through questionable means." Nathan sank into a chair. "All those families she helped, they never knew?" "Some suspected," the detective said. "But she was careful to work with people who were desperate for children and wouldn't ask too many questions. The money trail led us to several prominent families in the city." I watched Richard as he processed this information, seeing him struggle with the knowledge that his entire identity had been built on Violet's manipulation. Reaching out, I took his hand. "This doesn't change who you are," I said firmly. "The choices you've made, The person you've become. Those are yours, not hers. He squeezed my hand gratefully, but I could see the questions burning in his eyes. Who was his birth mother? Did she think about him? Was she still alive? Detective Uele cleared her throat. There's something else you should see. She led us to a hidden panel in the wall that the forensics team had discovered. Inside was a small safe containing a USB drive and a handwritten letter. It's from Jackson, she explained, written the day before he died. He must have hidden it here, knowing Violet would keep trophies from her victims in this room. The letter was addressed to Richard. With shaking hands, he unfolded it and began to read aloud. Dear Richard, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about your mother were correct, and I'm probably dead. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from the truth, but I hope this information helps you understand why I had to investigate. The evidence on this drive will expose not just the business crimes, but the human cost of Violet's ambitions. You deserve to know your true history, and your birth mother deserves to know her son grew up to be a good man. Her name is Claire Bennett. The last I traced her, she was living in Seattle. She never wanted to give you up. I know this will be difficult to accept, but remember, family is more than blood or names. It's about love, truth, and choosing to do what's right even when it costs us everything. Be safe. Be strong. Be the man I know you are. Love, Jackson. Richard's voice broke on the last words. I held him as he finally let himself cry. For Jackson, for his birth mother, for the life he could have had if Violet hadn't stolen him along with everything else. Nathan picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his hands. Jackson left us a map, he said thoughtfully. Not just to Violet's crimes, but to all the families she's torn apart. We can help them find each other again. Through the windows, we could see reporters still camped outside the Blackwood Mansion's gates. The story of Violet's arrest was everywhere, but they didn't know about this yet. The hidden journals, the stolen children, the decades of orchestrated heartbreak. What do you want to do? I asked Richard softly. He straightened up, wiping his eyes. In that moment, I saw not Violet's son or the Blackwood heir, but simply a man ready to face the truth, whatever it might cost. First, he said, I want to find Claire Bennett. Then, he looked at the stack of journals, each one containing the stories of lives Violet had destroyed. Then we start making things right. All of it. Detective Uele nodded approvingly. It won't be easy. Some of these wounds are very old, but they need to heal, I said, understanding now why Violet had really targeted me. Not just for my parents' land or to control Richard, but because she'd recognized in me something she could never be. Someone who believed in healing over power, in truth over control. As we left Violet's office, I paused in the doorway, looking back at the space where she'd plotted so many destructions. The morning sun had moved, throwing shadows into the corners where she'd hidden her secrets. They couldn't hide anymore. The truth was finally coming to light. The Seattle rain fell in a gentle mist as we pulled up to the small blue house on Highland Drive. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe, and I wasn't even the one about to meet my birth mother. Richard sat in the passenger seat, staring at the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. We can come back another day, I offered softly. There's no rush. He shook his head. I've waited 30 years without knowing. I can't wait another day. It had taken us 3 weeks to find Claire Bennett. 3 weeks of DNA tests confirming Jackson's information, of private investigators tracking down addresses, of sleepless nights wondering if she even wanted to be found. The media circus around Violet's arrest was still in full swing, with new victims coming forward daily. But this we'd kept private. I'll wait here, Nathan said from the back seat. He'd insisted on coming with us, feeling somehow responsible for helping to right Violet's wrongs. Take all the time you need. Richard squeezed my hand, then stepped out into the rain. I watched him walk up the neat brick path, past flowering hydrangeas and a small garden windmill. He hesitated at the door, then knocked. A woman answered, mid-50s, with Richard's same dark curls shot through with silver. Even from the car, I could see the moment of recognition flash across her face. She pressed her hands to her mouth, staring at him like she was seeing a ghost. What happened next was too private to watch. I turned away as mother and son embraced for the first time in 3 decades, both of them crying, both of them finally whole. Nathan cleared his throat roughly. Violet took so much from so many people, he said. But this she couldn't destroy. 2 hours later, we sat in Claire's cozy living room, looking through old photos and piecing together a story 30 years in the making. Claire had been a young artist, single and struggling when she discovered she was pregnant. Violet had found her through a corrupt adoption attorney, offering what seemed like a dream, a wealthy family, a good home for her baby, and enough money to pursue her art career. But then she changed the terms, Claire explained, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Said if I ever tried to contact you, she'd destroy my career, my reputation, everything. I was young and scared. I let her bully me into silence. She looked at Richard with tears in her eyes. Can you ever forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, Richard said firmly. Violet was the one who stole our chance to be a family. But we're here now. Claire's walls were covered in paintings, vibrant, emotional pieces that seemed to pulse with life. I never stopped thinking about you, she said. Every major piece I've ever done has a small blue butterfly hidden in it somewhere. It was my way of sending you messages, hoping somehow you'd see them and know you were loved. Richard stood up and walked to one of the paintings, searching until he found it. A tiny blue butterfly nestled in the corner of a storm-tossed sea. I used to collect butterflies as a kid, he said softly. Violet hated it, said it was a waste of time. She couldn't stand anything beautiful or free, I observed. It threatened her control. Claire turned to me. The news said you were supposed to marry Richard the day Violet was arrested, that she kidnapped you to stop the wedding. I nodded, thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. She thought she could control everyone's lives, but she didn't count on love being stronger than fear, or on her victims finding each other, Nathan added. He explained his connection to the story, how Violet had separated us years ago, how finding evidence of her crimes had brought us all together again. Claire listened intently, then stood and went to a closet. She returned with a large portfolio. After Jackson visited me, after he promised to help me find you, I started painting this series. I never showed it to anyone. It felt too personal, too raw. But now, she laid out the paintings one by one. They told a story of loss, longing, and hope, a mother's love transfigured into art. The final piece showed a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, its wings still wet but reaching for the sun. I finished this one the day I heard about Violet's arrest, Claire said. Something told me it was time, that the truth would finally come out. Richard studied the painting, then looked at his birth mother. Would you consider showing these? Not just these, but all your butterfly paintings? I think there are other families out there who need to see them, who need to know they're not alone. Claire's eyes lit up. You mean the other families affected by Violet's adoption scheme? I sat up straighter, an idea forming. More than that. What if we created a foundation? Used the Blackwood resources to help reunite families, support art therapy programs, advocate for adoption reform, transform Violet's legacy of destruction into something healing, Nathan mused. She'd hate that. Good, Richard said firmly. Then he turned to me. But before we take on saving the world, there's something I need to ask you. My heart skipped as he knelt beside my chair. Beatrice, these past weeks have shown me what real love and family look like. Not the twisted version Violet created, but something true and strong. When I imagine building this new legacy, I can't picture doing it without you. Will you marry me? Not because of any schemes or expectations, but just because I love you? This time, there was no Violet to interrupt, no secrets to uncover, no lies to unravel. Just truth, love, and the promise of a future we would build together. Yes, I said, as Claire wiped away happy tears and Nathan grinned. 1,000 times yes. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, catching the crystal wind chimes in Claire's window and scattering rainbows across the room. Somewhere in the garden, a real butterfly fluttered past, small and blue and perfectly free. The healing was just beginning. But in that moment, surrounded by love and truth and possibility, I knew we were all exactly where we were meant to be. The morning of my second wedding day dawned clear and bright. This time, I stood before a different mirror, in a different dress, simpler, but somehow more beautiful than the first. Claire adjusted my veil, her artist's hands gentle as she pinned it in place. "You look perfect," she said, meeting my eyes in the reflection. "And I'm not just saying that as the mother of the groom." The past 6 months had transformed all our lives. The Butterfly Foundation, as we'd named it, had already helped reunite 15 families separated by Violet's adoption scheme. Claire's art exhibition, Messages in Wings, had become a symbol of hope for parents and children searching for each other. A knock at the door revealed Nathan, handsome in his best man suit. "Everyone's ready, but there's something you should know." He hesitated. "Violet's asked to see you. Both of you. She's in the chapel's side room with her guards." My stomach clenched. Violet had been under house arrest while awaiting trial, her empire crumbling as more evidence of her crimes emerged. This was her first time being allowed out, and only because Richard had requested it. "We don't have to," Claire said quickly, protectively. "Not today." But I knew we did. Some circles needed to close before new ones could begin. "It's okay," I said. "Let's hear what she has to say." Violet sat in a straight-backed chair, her designer outfit replaced by simple clothing, her carefully maintained appearance showing signs of wear, but her eyes were clear, clearer than I'd ever seen them. "I won't stay for the ceremony," she said without preamble. "I just needed to see you both." She looked at Claire. "I convinced myself I was giving your son a better life, that power and wealth were more important than love. I was wrong." Claire's voice shook slightly. "Did you ever regret it? Any of it?" "I regretted feeling regret," Violet replied. "I buried it under more schemes, more control, more destruction, until I couldn't feel anything at all." She turned to me. "You were right about me, Beatrice. Everything I did was about power, but watching you all rebuild what I tried to destroy, it's shown me a different kind of strength." "Is that why you wanted to see us?" I asked. "To apologize?" "No." She stood slowly. "To thank you. For showing Richard what real family looks like. For giving him the mother I never could be." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small box. This belonged to Jackson. He'd want Richard to have it today. Inside was a pair of silver cufflinks, each decorated with a tiny butterfly. My eyes filled with tears, understanding the message. Even Jackson had somehow known about Claire's secret symbols of love. "Goodbye, Violet," I said softly. She nodded, allowing the guards to lead her away. She looked smaller somehow, but also more human than she ever had behind her mask of power. The ceremony itself was everything a wedding should be, full of joy, love, and truth. Richard waited for me under an arch of blue flowers, his face lighting up as I walked toward him. Claire sat in the front row, beside my parents who had welcomed her into their lives as easily as breathing. Nathan stood proudly as best man, his own healing journey reflected in his smile. Our vows were simple but profound. We promised to build something new from the ashes of the past, to always choose truth over power, love over control. When Richard kissed me, the applause wasn't just for us. It was for everyone who had found their way home. At the reception, Claire unveiled her wedding gift, a massive painting of 2 butterflies emerging from intertwined chrysalises, their wings touching as they took flight together. Behind them, smaller butterflies represented all the lives we'd helped piece back together through the foundation. "To new beginnings," Nathan toasted, his eyes twinkling, "and to the power of second chances." Richard squeezed my hand under the table, just as he had so many times before. But now, there were no secrets between us, no hidden agendas, no shadows lurking behind the gesture. Later, as we danced under the stars, he whispered, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mother hadn't tried to stop our first wedding?" I thought about it. We might have had a perfect society wedding, but we wouldn't have uncovered the truth. Those families wouldn't be reunited. You wouldn't have found Claire, and I wouldn't really have found myself, he added, or understood what kind of man I want to be. The music swelled around us as other couples joined the dance. Claire with my father, Nathan with his new girlfriend, families and friends all moving together in a celebration of love that was stronger than any force that had tried to break it. I looked up at my husband, seeing in his eyes the same joy and peace I felt in my heart. So, maybe this was the perfect wedding after all. Above us, the evening sky was filled with stars, each one a point of light in the darkness. Like the tiny butterflies Claire had hidden in her paintings all those years, they reminded me that hope never truly dies. It just waits, sometimes for years, for the right moment to spread its wings and fly. Violet had tried to write our stories in her own hand, to control the narrative of our lives. But in the end, love had written a better story, one of healing, redemption, and the kind of power that comes not from destroying lives, but from helping them bloom. As Richard and I danced under the starlight, surrounded by our real family, not one built on schemes and secrets, but on truth and love, I knew that this was just the beginning of our story. And this time, we would write every chapter together.